And now my newest friend, my newest American brother, a young man with a personality larger than life. Please help me welcome to the stage, Charlie Kirk.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Awesome to be here. And so inspired by your story. I love Romanians. I grew up with Romanians all in Chicago. So it's an incredible story. Thank you guys for having me. There's a lot I want to talk about. I look forward to the discussion with the Congressman after this and with Steve more. Steve is awesome. I've known Steve for years. And Steve is the what's happening guy. I'm going to be the why guy tonight. And because I think that we got to go a level deeper as conservatives and Republicans and not just talk about everything that Joe Biden is doing wrong. That's very important, right? And it's important for policy discussions. I'm interested in policy, but I'm much more interested in what people can do to change this and why things are actually happening. And so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to Wheeling High School, and it was a very diverse school. 53% of the high school I went to was English as a second language. And we looked at each other as human beings, and we didn't even look at skin color. It was this idea that we're going to judge people based on character and values, not based on what you look like. And it worked really well. And my best friends were of all different racial backgrounds. Now that high school, 10 years later, is a complete and total mess. In just one decade, they have destroyed that high school. And one thing I was always taught growing up in high school was that we want the same thing as Democrats, we just have different ways of getting there. You guys have probably heard this one way or the other, right? Maybe from a relative, maybe from someone who's trying to build bridges between Democrats and Republicans. You know, a common critique is that we're too divided in the country. I'm sure you've heard that before. And I think there's a trap in both of those. Because in some ways they're trying to lull us to sleep and dull our weapons, our metaphorical weapons, politically, while we try to give the left the benefit of good intentions. And so I used to do this. Again, growing up, I used to believe that liberals and leftists, I should say, the Democrats, they want the same America we want. I'm not even remotely convinced of that. In fact, I'm convinced of the opposite. I know why Joe Biden's doing this stuff. I know why he's going after American fossil fuel. I know why he's trying to addict Americans to dependence, and I know why he's opening the borders. Well, first, it's not about him. It's about the people behind him, because he's just a fill-in. We know that. And I could go on for 20 minutes, but it's not helpful. It's not useful to you, because there's plenty of people that do that every single night on television that make fun of his cognitive decline. Whatever, that's fine. The point is that he's just a stand-in for a group of people that are executing what I call the top-down revolution. And what the top-down revolution is the most powerful people in our country that are preemptively striking you. It's the first time, really, in Western history that the people that are wealthy, people that vote that way in the Democrat districts, the people that control the corporations, the people that educate your children, the people that run your colleges, the people that are running your churches too, a lot of your churches, they are preemptively striking you before you strike them. Now, what does that look like? Well, that looks like Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola acting like a Democrat super PAC because Georgia moderately fixes their voting laws. It looks like Google, Twitter, Facebook kicking the President of the United States off their social platforms at one time. It looks like what we would call cancel culture, which you got to get rid of that phrase. It's book burning is what it is. It's a modern day framing of what we were always told was an anti-American value. And so I no longer give the Democrats the benefit of good intentions. That's for the congressman to try to do in D.C. I'm done trying to find common ground with these people. We have to defeat these people is what we have to do. And I thought Senator Tim Scott was eloquent, and I thought it was so important what he had to say. The only critique that I said is, I'm not finding common ground with them. They want a different America than we want. They're okay with 1 million abortions a year. They want a wide open border. They've had a chance now to step up and try to solve the border crisis. Federal government says, we're not getting involved. It's astronomically worse than it ever was during President Trump's time. Intentionally so. You have to understand, we are living through intentionally manufactured crisis. And this is something that is hard for a lot of people that are center-right voters to understand, that you're being governed by people that actually do not have your best interests. That's a hard thing for some people to admit, because we always want to give the benefit of good intentions to anyone, whether it be a restaurant owner, a small business person, an athlete. But I don't know how much more evidence we have to submit that when you keep the southern border open, when you are saying that men should be able to compete in women's sports, when you are giving the most graphic sexual education imaginable in California, and we're supposed to just believe they want the same thing we want. That's not the case. So here's what's happening, and this is the message I want to bring to you, and I think that you're already there, but I want to just reinforce that, because this is where the Republican base is right now. And this is not a policy debate. This is not. We have better ideas. We know it. Steve just went through it. Okay, we got that. This is a brass-knuckle political fight. They're playing for keeps, everybody, okay? This is Operation Hummingbird with the National Socialist Workers' Party executed. And I said that publicly, and I'll say it again. If you guys know what Operation Hummingbird is, it's when the National Socialist Worker Party in Germany, they said, go after the political opponents. Get rid of them. They want a one-party state. This is not about governing. This is not unifying. This is about, in their opinion, a chess move where they never have to compete for votes again. Look at New York, look at New Jersey, look at California, look at Massachusetts, Illinois. That's what they want for the country. That's why they want D.C. to be added as a state. That's why they want H.R. 1. That's why they want H.R. 5. Everything about them now, they are out of patience. We're being governed by angry septuagenarians, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, that have waited this moment for their revolution. And they're done pandering to the other side. And here's my biggest criticism, and you have a wonderful congressman here who is not part of this, of the Republican Party, which I generally think is worthless. Let me just be perfectly honest with you. I generally think the Republican Party's worthless. No, generally. And I think the congressman's doing a great job, and I'm going to make him exempt from this, is that they come and they say, we want to spend $4 trillion on infrastructure, or some ridiculous number. And then Senate Republicans are like, oh, big win, we got them down to $2 trillion. Like, really? That's our idea? Like, no. Let me be very clear. The Democrats are enthusiastic about using political power to destroy the country and destroy your values, preemptively striking you. We're terrified to use political power. Now, this is a hard thing for conservatives to talk about, because generally political power, we think of ourselves as, no, we don't want to use political power. We want to get government out of people's lives. And that's the way we should be thinking. When the Democrats are using the things they control at every single corner and turn to have your children hate the country, where we can't even get on social media and have a fair shot at speaking anymore. When you turn on Disney Plus and your 6-year-olds are acting as if it is a normative human behavior for men to think they are women. That's the new thing in Disney Plus. They're in the next 30 days. That millions of young families are watching. Then I think it's long past time for conservatives to take inventory of whatever political power we have, and we have to start using it. So here's what that looks like. It looks a little bit like how Ron DeSantis is governing in Florida. And I pray Texas will start to realize this. Here's what Florida has, an offensive type mindset. We're going to strike you before you strike us. We're going to tax the tech companies when they kick conservatives off social media. We're going to make you pay a price when you act a certain way. We're going to use political power to subsidize the things we like and punish the things we don't like. That's what conservatives have to do. Now, conservatives aren't used to talking like this. I'm not going to oversee a managed decline of the country. I'm not doing that, okay? I'm not going to wait our turn. We control 27 state legislative, state senates, and governor's mansions across the country. Might be 21 trifectas. And we're asking ourselves, well, what should we do? Well, here's a good one. Ron DeSantis, again, he says critical race theory will not be taught in Florida schools, or else you'll be fired and the school will be defunded. Texas needs to pass that now. Now. Why is it that Vermont has constitutional carry and Texas doesn't? That Senator Bernie Sanders can go home and have constitutional carry, but Senator Ted Cruz does not. We got to get an offensive mindset. This is the only thing these people understand, is playing offense. They play us for fools. They don't seriously, they don't think they're ever going to lose power again, because they think they got us where we want. They think that if they can weaponize the Department of Justice, and do I have to go through the list? I mean, we all see what's happening here. Dinesh D'Souza, Steve Bannon, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Rudy Giuliani, the list goes on. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden is now a college professor at Tulane University. Now, I'm not even going to submit to you that these people did nothing wrong. What I will say is, you show me the man, I'll show you the crime. When the more laws, the less justice, and you have a DOJ with thousands of people and their full-time job is obsessing about going after their political opponents. You ever hear of the Red Terror? You ever hear of the Cultural Revolution? You ever hear of, as I said, Operation Hummingbird? Political power by them is just a means to an end to remake America in their image. So if Donald Trump taught us anything, it's, look, common ground and common values, what Senator Tim Scott said. That's very 1980s, okay? That's Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. We all want the same thing. Growing up with strong Catholic values and two guys that are more alike than dissimilar. I got nothing in common with Nancy Pelosi. I got nothing with her. No, seriously. Seriously. I'm done trying to find like, oh, we're gonna negotiate. No, like, you know what? We have the people on our side, and when we do, all of a sudden, we are going to do what you did to us, which is we're gonna show you that our beliefs and our value systems, if you dare cross that line, it comes at a price and a cost. And this is where you guys come in. And this, again, I'm very excited because the Republican Party is starting to think this way. And let me be clear, this could go a bad direction where we abuse political power. I'm actually not that worried about that because we haven't even started to entertain using, we haven't even begun like the process of it, right? It's like we have this big fear, like, oh no, we could abuse it. I'm like, guys, I'm telling you, this is either you have to be able to show the left that we mean business, or these totalitarians are just gonna keep on pushing us into complete and total submission. And so here's the thing that I'm actually really excited about, is that you guys, the people, the voters, are on the right side of these issues. But some of these governors are not. I'll give you a great example. Governor Asa Hutchinson, right, neighboring state. He's a very dumb person. Let me just be very honest, right? He's a Republican. And so he goes on Tucker Carlson and he makes this argument that he thinks that children should be able to chemically castrate themselves, right? No, that's what he does, right? He goes on Tucker Carlson and he thinks that a conservative value is allowing the chemical castration of children, right? And so, because some corporation whispered in his ear to say that that's something a good idea. You know, Governor of North Dakota, Doug Burnham, said the same thing. And if we stand for anything as a party and as a movement, it should probably be that children should not be able to harm themselves of how God designed them, of biological. That's probably a pretty core conservative value, right? And he was so stunned that when he went on Tucker, that when he said, oh, I'm a Ronald Reagan, Bill Buckley conservative, Tucker didn't take it easy on him. And it's because you guys feel the way that I do, which is that we've been striking R's in our ballots for our whole life. And there are some great ones. Senator Ted Cruz is a fighter, legitimately, and he deserves credit for that. He does a great job. He's a friend of mine. And there are some good ones, and Texas has a great delegation there. But boy, there are some needs for improvements, I'll tell you what. And I could go through those. And I'm not even going to comment on that because I don't like going into people's states and telling you guys what to do. I really don't. It's up for you guys to decide, discuss amongst yourselves, and whatever. So, but you guys feel the way that I do, which is that we've been giving you power and we're losing the country. This is, again, it's like, you guys tried to get your leaders' attention. Showing up at rallies, the Gadsden flag, right? Listening to Rush Limbaugh, buying a lot of pillows after watching Fox News. Like, you did everything you possibly could to try to get your leaders' attention. By the way, promo code Kirk if you're ever on mypillow.com. Okay, let me just be very clear. No, it's true. Promo code Kirk, all right? Love Mike Lindell. A lot of courage and energy, I'll tell you what. But the voters tried to get our leaders' attention. They elected Donald Trump. They said, if you're not going to listen to us, we are going to send the ultimate wrecking ball. Please listen to us. Go. And just, whatever you do, it can't be worse than what's happening. And Donald Trump actually did something you're not supposed to do, which is he fulfilled every single promise that he made. He was like, you're not supposed to do that, right? But even deeper than that, I'll be honest, I love the economic success and all that, but this was kind of a creature of Republicans' own making. We had power in the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Broke up every single one of these tech companies when we had the political power in the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Because now, you know that President Trump's interview with Dan Bongino just got taken down off of YouTube. So you have a former president who talks to Dan Bongino, YouTube decides to digitally assassinate him. Talk to the person who lived under communism in Romania. The dictators and the despots and the tyrants will always use political power to destroy the people that dare criticize them. I'm not even remotely saying that's what we should do, not even close. Instead, I'm saying we should use political power to make sure that sort of stuff shouldn't happen. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that the American ideal that we have is a special and a beautiful one. And then if we are going to sit as spectators, because like, oh, our principles don't allow us to get involved. No, your principles mandate you get involved in this stuff. The principles that we have actually should tell our leaders that this time is not like any other. People say, wow, the Democrats have taken a far left turn. I was like, well, first of all, where have you been? I mean, like, I actually go to these college campuses so you guys don't have to. And by the way, if you want to know, the most liberal school, the most nasty, mean school I've ever gone was University of Texas, Austin. And I'm going to return this fall, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to do very well. It's going to be really nice. Tell you what, you guys should all come. It's going to be great. So, but I've been going to these campuses, seeing these ideas brewing and given a platform. I mean, I heard the defund police about, I'm going to get to that in a second because we're all talking about that incorrectly. Where's Lee? Lee's here somewhere. Lee did a great event yesterday, by the way, in Bandera. Thank you. That was terrific. And we talked about this last night. But the ideas that were started on college campuses have now been brought to the most national level. And people say that, oh, the Democrat Party's taken such a far turn to the left. It's always been there. They're just cocky and confident enough now to say the private part out loud. Because they actually think you're really weak. They do. They know you're too decent to do what's necessary to save the country. It's that simple. So it's something to pray and think about. They privately know they are willing to go into the streets with weapons and prevent us to go speak at churches and private events, which is what just happened to us in Seattle. Some of you guys listen to our podcast. Thankfully, a new church actually stepped up, and I'll be on a plane tomorrow morning to Seattle speaking at 2 churches, which we're very excited about. Again, the offensive mindset. Go where you're not supposed to go. Seattle and college campuses, 2 places. And Austin, my goodness, geez. But I want to mention the abolish police thing. Everyone's missing this. And Congressman, please bring this message back to D.C. They do not want to abolish police. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's garbage. They want a national police force. And this is why Austin and San Antonio police officers are now dressing in the same uniforms. They're using the same call signs. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Austin and San Antonio police, their cars look very similar. I just talked to a bunch of police officers yesterday. They want to destroy the idea of local police. They want to get rid of local sheriffs, and they want to have a national critical race theory trained, racial sensitivity, indoctrination national police force so that the FBI then becomes the national police across the country. That's what they want. So how are they going to force that? Well, you only force that when you have a lot of crime everywhere. So they want crime. They do. I've said that publicly. I'll say it again. They want crime. Crime helps their political agenda. And so, again, Republicans, again, this Congress, excluded, because I talk like that. It's, you know. They're like, oh, they want to get rid of the police. Like, no, they want a stormtrooper force at their disposal. They want a Gestapo. Of course they do. You think that Pelosi actually wants there to be no police? No, she'd love a police that she could send to a neighborhood that gets a little too rowdy from Donald Trump. She wants a police that can go shut down the next MAGA rally. She wants a police that she can deploy at any time possible. So you have to understand every single one of their decisions comes for a very specific reason. Why do they want to get rid of fossil fuels? Well, it's because most fossil fuel companies donate to Republicans. That's why, obviously, they want to cut off the capital supply for most Republican politicians. It's not about energy. It's not about the environment. If it was, they would act in a completely different way. They wouldn't fly private jets. They would actually love natural gas, which is totally in favor of the environment. They would actually talk to Republicans about this issue instead of just saying, keep it all on the ground. No, they're trying to create something that will give them political power. Now, here's the thing that Republicans can't. This is the number one issue, and I know some of you have in your head. The one thing that's preventing you from believing what I'm saying, maybe not this audience, but most, is like, Charlie, who could do something like this? Who could be so dark, so fallen? I don't believe that actually is possible. I get this question all the time. What's their end game? What do they want to replace it with? How many of you have thought that? That's okay if you have. I'm sure you have. These are merchants of chaos, everybody. You're trying to tell me they have a plan? No. They just want to be on the balcony when everything's burning with the people on their side. These are broken and dark people we're dealing with. These are not builders. What have they ever built? They haven't built anything. No. They're very good at infiltration and deconstruction and disruption and destruction. So it really is a dark versus light type deal. I hate to be this like dramatic about it, but it really is. It's a light versus. So here's the thing, and here's the question. And then I don't know how much time I have. I'm just keep going. Okay, there you go. I can go into a lot of different topics, by the way. So, this is the question you have to ask yourself. And the question is, what are historians going to write 30 years from now? Are they going to write that the decent people that agreed the country was in a bad direction and there were people that were willing to tear it apart, they did one of two things. So here's the direction we're currently going, just to be perfectly honest with you. The direction we're currently going is that people that have a nice life are afraid of losing their nice life and would rather lose their nice life than the country. It's that simple. They're afraid of losing their friends, being called a racist, losing business contracts. They are using our wealth against us. They are. I have parents come up to me, they're like, well, I'm afraid of making a big, deal at the local school board meeting. They're making my kid take a knee because he's a white kid, and they read white fragility, but I want my kid to go to college. Okay, so basically you're admitting my thesis, which is that your belief that college is the only way for your kid to succeed and your idea of that little, measured success is preventing you from actually fighting correctly right now and contesting for truth. They know this. This is exactly why universities, which, by the way, every single one of these universities should be defunded in Texas completely. They're indoctrination factories. The fact that they're subsidized by the taxpayer. This is why universities, they're filled with conservatives on their boards, and they receive hundreds of millions of dollars in donations, and yet they continue to teach the most vapid anti-American ideology time and time, because no one actually wants to do the fight because you might not be invited to the football game. No, it's true. You might actually lose a friend. And so they're using our decency against us. They know we are peacemakers, and we should be. They know that. But the Bible also talks very clearly about times of war and conflict. Very clearly. And some people say, well, we're not there yet. I'm like, man, whoa. I mean, it's just and I obviously mean a culture battle and war for Media Matters that's watching, obviously. Everything I'm talking about is peaceful and should remain so. And so, but when these values are being crushed and they're being strangled, that really asks the question. Or here's the other thing that can happen, which is why they're preemptively striking. And this is why I have hope. And this is why I'm giving 330 speeches a year. That's why I'm doing 2 podcasts a day. This is why I'm doing our radio show. We're on over 100 radio stations across the country because I see this as clearly as ever. I deleted all the social media apps from my phone. We have a whole team that manages it. And I've just I'm not kidding. Ever since January 20th, I really dug deep and I took a week and prayed and reflected. And God says, you ask for wisdom, you'll get wisdom. And I see it so unbelievably clearly what's happening, which is why I told my team, I want to go everywhere, anywhere I can, up until my wedding, which is a week from today. It's very exciting. And then taking a week off, and then we're resuming. You guys got to pick up the slack for that 1 week. I'm just asking for 1 week, everybody, okay? 1 week, which is, I see it so clearly what's happening, which is that this is their big offensive strike. This is their end game. They finally think they got it. But there's some moves that need to happen, and there's some things that are going to present itself, which Joe Manchin, in a bizarre turn of events, actually might save the constitutional republic, which I never thought we'd say, which that's actually what we're betting on, where we got a lot of problems. But it's so obvious, which is that the left is paranoid at every single turn. They're paranoid because they know the one thing that could prevent this from happening is you guys rising up in record numbers. So they have everything except the people, a minorly important thing to have, right? And Steve Moore made a great joke, which is that the Oscars and his speech, they had the record lowest ratings ever. And there's something to that, by the way. There's this artificiality of the left right now. It's so astroturf, everything about it. There's no support. Everyone's wearing masks and so dystopian and dark. There's nothing organic or real or human. And it's like when people support him, it's kind of like, yeah, I guess I support him. And like you ask them what they do, they run like a hedge fund. Like that's basically Joe Biden's constituency, right? And it's because they know that when decent Americans of all races and all backgrounds, multiracial Americans, the working class, which Donald Trump invigorated more than any other Republican since Dwight D. Eisenhower, the only thing that keeps them up at night is a movement of you saying we're not going to take it anymore. And it's not something that can be planned, by the way. It's not something that can have people say, well, who's our central leader? It's not even about that. I can't wait for Donald Trump to hit the road again because I think public displays of support are really important. I really do. I think that's a really important thing. But it's more than that. And it's based on this question that I can't stand, which I get all the time, and somebody said this in the photo line. I'm not going to say who, but that's okay. I get this everywhere I go. And it wasn't everyone who said this. They said, hey, Charlie, how's it going out there? Like, what am I, like a running back for the Dallas Cowboys? Because there's a disconnect. How's it going out there? You know what that tells me? You're not in the fight. What that tells me is you're not sacrificing. You're watching. You're a spectator. This is not a Dallas Cowboys game. You can actually be just as involved as I'm in. You probably have more credentials than I have. I didn't go to college. I'm 27 years old. I started this in the suburbs of Chicago. I started traveling and speaking and creating, and Turning Point USA is now the premier conservative organization in the country on thousands of campuses across the country and high school. It's just, and we've been so blessed by so many different people, and I don't discount that. But as far as me doing this, anyone can do it. Any one of you could do what I'm doing. It is completely an open door. There is no Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton gatekeeper. I'm only saying things that the modern American can see, which is, by the way, which is one of the brilliance of Rush Limbaugh, which is that he was so accessible to so many different people, which was that he talked the way you talked, and he saw things that were actually happening, and he wasn't just talking about team right good and team left bad. He saw things before they happened. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that no more spectator conservatism. No more being in the bleachers, getting your popcorn, watching Tucker Carlson, and buying gold or a pillow or Relief Factor. It's fine. I love that stuff. It's great. No, but here's the real call to action, because you guys have it really good. And this is really, I'm talking right now to the Republican women that have grandchildren. I want you to think about that. Are you sacrificing for the country? Because I could tell you our Turning Point USA leaders right now, they've lost almost all of their friends starting Turning Point groups in high school and colleges. They've been called every name. They've been doxxed on social media. They've been kicked out of fraternities and sororities. I'll tell you a story, and I want you to ask yourself if you've even gotten remotely this much in the fight as this young lady in Minnesota. White Bear Lake High School in Minnesota. And her name is Avery Severson, I believe, a couple weeks ago. She comes out and she says that she wants to start a Turning Point USA group. And I did a whole episode on this on our podcast. And as soon as she comes out to want to start a Turning Point USA group at her local high school, all of a sudden all these messages she's never seen before, awfully racist messages, get attributed to her. She, of course, claims innocence, and she didn't do it. She's the sweetest girl. You talk to her for 20 seconds, you know that she didn't do this. But that did not satisfy the adults, the teachers, the school board, the administrators who staged walkouts and protests against her for a child, a 16-year-old, for bringing a Turning Point USA group. So her parents did the right thing. They called the bluff. The police and the FBI got involved. I kid you not. The Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved, which, again, is just like Hunter Biden anywhere, you know what I mean? Whatever. The FBI got involved in a high school dispute over racist messages. So this is what ended up happening. Again, this is where we are, because we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of political will, and that's what I'm going to close on. We're not a nation of laws anymore, and I'm going to get into that, which is it's a sad realization, but it's something we must adjust to. So the FBI comes out, and the administration says, well, the FBI conducted their investigation, and we concluded Avery did not send these messages, but the person who sent them does not pose a risk or a threat to the students of color. A total hoax. Designed to destroy her life. She had to walk around with security. Her parents' house was doxxed. 16 years old. Should have been a #1 news story, obviously. We got it out there, Fox, Daily Mail, but it just kind of glosses over because our media doesn't care about that, right? Of course not. I want you to ask yourselves the question, are you sacrificing that much? Like a 16-year-old in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, miles from George Floyd's death, which is the hardest place imaginable to be a conservative right now, where everyone wants to virtue signal and outdo one another. I could give you story after story after story of our young people that are literally, one of our cases right now is pending, hopefully, to go to the United States Supreme Court of Arkansas State University that kicked off our Turning Point USA groups, and we'll find out if the Supreme Court's going to take the case or not. And so what I'm getting at here, though, is It's not in our nature as conservatives to be activistic. In fact, I had a woman the other day I was having dinner with. She said, that's a dirty word, being an activist. She said, I'm a voter and a citizen. I said, well, that's why we're the place that we're in. It's the place that we're in because the left, they're unafraid to show up at school board meetings if you dare say that men should be men and women should be women, which is something that I think you guys believe here, Lost Pines Republican women. And so it's not in our nature. So here's what I'll close with, and then we could do the discussion. Is that okay? I think Steve's done with his interview. Which is, we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of political will. I want you to think about that. Alexander Hamilton, not a US president, but a good man, he predicted correctly the courts will never side against public opinion. I want you to think about that. That the courts conform to you, to the loudest voices. Not necessarily the majority opinion, but the opinion of people they care about, or the loudest voices, or the ones that are willing to get out there in the public square. Whether it be the Dred Scott decision, or the decision that reversed it, Brown versus the Board of Education. Dred Scott is an awful decision for our country, by the way. It was by 7 Democrats on the US Supreme Court. The 2 dissenters were both Republicans, but we can get into that at a different time. Whether it even be Roe versus Wade, whether it be the recent gay marriage decision. It was not a nation of laws, but that of political will. We all know this. This is why Hillary Clinton will never go to jail. Let me be very clear. She will never go to jail. It's not going to happen. It's because we're a nation of political will. They control the right apparatuses, and they are willing to clamor and to get angry enough to not allow that to happen. So what does that mean for you? Anyone here can name every single school board member you have locally? Anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. Okay. You just had an election. Okay. Good. Is that a good thing? Good. That's a good thing. I will say, I used to ask that question, and no one knew any. Now I got like 6 hands, so we're making progress. I want to speak here a year from today. I want everyone to raise their hand. Like, of course, we know our school board members closer than our senators. That's the answer. They allow public comment at every single school board meeting. Has anyone testified recently about mask mandates, mandatory vaccinations, critical race theory, teaching concepts? I know you have, Lee, and you. They call the police on you. That's how you know you're doing a good job, okay? Here's what I'm getting at. This is not in our nature, but it's time for us to rise above our nature and all of a sudden say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to try everything till something sticks. I'm going to be active. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to learn something new every single day. I'm going to organize. We're going to gather. We're going to do public displays of support. We're going to register voters, run for school board, run for state rep, knock on doors. People say, what do you do? I say, there's nothing but things to do. There's so much stuff to do. By the way, you got like the capital of despotism in Austin, Texas. Like, just do something there. Anything there makes a difference. And really what people ask, and I'll close with this. The two things that when people ask, Charlie, what do I do? They're not asking what to do. No. They're asking, what can I do without offending anybody? That's what they're asking me. They say, what can I do that's safe? That's what they're asking me. No, there really isn't. Anything meaningful means you got to get eye to eye with somebody. You got to run for office. You got to contest. You got to fight. You got to push back. Then the final thing that people ask me is this. Are we going to win? I get this question all the time. I say the answer is yes, but let me say why people ask that question. They ask that question because they want me to give them permission to give up. We think about it, it's very logical, right? There's no answer to that question. If it was yes, are you going to change anything? Maybe you just kind of, it's like, oh, Charlie says we're going to win, I guess I could stop. No. They really want me to say no, because then I don't do anything. Like, what's the point? It's all done with. They control the tech companies, they control the churches, they control the schools, they control this. It's all done. We might as well get in the coalition of eat us last, enjoy America the most as possible before it all ends. It's actually completely irrelevant whether or not I think we're going to win, which I think we will. But the point is that I'm not an odds maker, and you shouldn't be either. Get that out of your mind. No more Vegas odds making. No more like, well, there's a 25% probability that if I go knock on doors on this person, it's actually, that's not the way the left thinks. You think that they got into the Texas game a decade ago in the odds making? No. They said, we want that. It's ours. And we are not going to stop till we get it. And they're moving closer and closer. You guys see it. And there were some good results this last election cycle in Texas, and there were some troublesome trends here in Texas. By the way, is one of the negatives of all this outgrowth migration, which I see things a little bit differently. Say, stop recruiting California companies to come to Texas. You don't need them. It just makes your property taxes higher. I have a contrarian view on this. I really do. I think they shouldn't be welcome. No, there should be an immigrant question. You should test this in the Supreme Court. Seriously, are you coming here as a missionary or a refugee? Seriously, are you coming here to tell us how great California is, or are you fleeing California? That should be on the entrance exam. That's it. Like, are you fleeing or are you trying to convert? Anyway, it's a complete sidebar, but it's in your hands. So we are going to win if you believe what you do matters. We're going to win if you believe what you do matters. And I'm starting to see people rise up all across the country. Again, I'm speaking everywhere. We had 2,000 people in San Diego, and they have all these creative ideas. And I'm so inspired by California conservatives. I'm going to be honest, I'm more inspired by California conservatives than Texas conservatives. You know why? They control nothing. Nothing. And they're still fighting like you wouldn't believe. They're trying to recall their governor. They're walking in a wall, like 1,000 of them at this church walked into Walmart the other day with no masks. No, it's like unbelievably creative stuff, right? I love them. And so there's so much that can be done. The greatest man in the 20th century, Winston Churchill, was the only man smiling on Pearl Harbor. When he walked into his war cabinet said, "What is wrong with you?" And he had a cigar in his left hand. He said, "We have won the war." He said, "What are you talking about? The Americans just got completely obliterated." He said, "Once Americans wake up, the game is over." The question is, are you going to wake up and retake what is ours, our nation and our home, the United States of America? God bless you guys, and let's have a great conversation. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite Michael Cloud and Stephen Moore back to the stage, please. Stephen, still here? All right. Please, yeah, you can sit on the grab. Hey, there you go.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
Good. You're one of the good Republicans. Let me say that again.
All right. I was supposed to be taking about 5 minutes to talk about my life and my book and everything, but I can't. After Charlie, I mean, who in their right mind would speak after Charlie? So I'm going to go to questions, not keep you here very long, and maybe if Stephen, oh, there he is, he's coming back up. Put your hands together for Stephen. The microphone on for him.
By the way, can I just say one quick thing about something Charlie just said that I
Please
think
go
is so
ahead,
important?
please.
You know, you're so right. You know, there were all these crazy ideas the left had. And we would just kind of laugh at them, right? These lunatic, crazy people. And 3 or 4 months ago, people would ask me, they can't do this, they can't do that. They can't pack the Supreme Court. They can't get rid of the filibuster. They can't make Washington, D.C. a state. All of these, they can't spend $6 trillion. Well, you know what? These people are crazy enough to do it. And that's why I think exactly what you gentlemen are talking about is so important. There is no room for pacifists right now. We have to stop them. We have to play defense like it's 4th down on the 1-yard line because these people are deadly serious, right? I mean, they just are.
I do believe it was Truman who said that for evil to prevail, it takes good men and women to do nothing. But I believe that, at least tonight, the men and women in this room have woken up. And we are convinced, based on the information we got from them, that we have to take action, serious action. So with that, I'd like to ask first Charlie, somebody wants to know, what is the most important action conservatives must take to preserve and advance Trump America First vision?
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize. I'd love to get the other panel member. Okay, good. Well, the most important thing, look, I'll say this, which is, I kind of outlined a couple things, and there's a few one that you might not be expecting me to say, and then the other one which is just really obvious. The first one I'll say is that spend 20 minutes a day with your phone off, almost doing a political devotional. The same way you would do a religious devotional, which I'm a big believer of, which is reading the Bible every single day. Now, what's the significance of this? If you spend 20 minutes a day reading the Federalist Papers, or Thomas Sowell, or Milton Friedman, you'll start to understand what's happening around you with more clarity, and all of a sudden the answer to your question, what do I do, will naturally present itself. When you start to see what people have done before you to save the Republic, it'll become a lot more obvious. I'll give you a great example. I've become fascinated with Benjamin Franklin. I think he's just phenomenal. He doesn't get enough credit for being one of the most wise, charming, and amazing people ever to live on the planet, quite honestly, and kind of the godfather of the American Revolution. And so he was a big fan of holding court late at night in American taverns, well into the night. And so that might say, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I said, no, that actually does apply to you. For the American Revolution to be successful, it took these tightly knit groups of people that knew each other and shared values that met for hours, and then action came out of it. So maybe, are you guys meeting at a regular basis with 8 or 9 of your closest friends and discussing the news? Having coffee, or maybe on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning? That's how the American Revolution was hatched. That's just one example of that. The second thing is this. You're not doing your job if you're not taking terrain. Maybe it's you need to just be in a leadership of a Lions Club. Maybe it's a school board position. Maybe it's you're going to get your local neighborhood. And how many people here are precinct committeemen or women? Whoa, 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 whoa. Every hand should be up. That's like the least. I thought at least 90% of the hands would be up. So let me just be clear. Forget everything I just said. Everyone needs to become a precinct committee person immediately. Now, if you don't know what that is, okay. Some people are saying, what's a precinct committee person? Got it. No, I mean, this is why we lose. I'll be very honest with you. Like, it's the most easy thing. Okay, precinct committee person is you're in charge of getting your neighbors to vote. It's like 100 houses. That's it. Is that you get provided with literature and you're just in charge of 100 houses. Do you know that Democrats in Texas have nearly 45% of all precinct committee positions filled? You know they have 80% in Georgia and 70% in Arizona. Now, I'll give them, they have the teacher unions to be able to fill these positions easier. But if everyone here tonight said, you know, I'm going to be a precinct committee person, your county chairman here, which are terrific, or your state party chair can sign you up for Precinct 101 in Gillespie County. Now, what does that mean? That means near the election, you're going to get in walkbooks of literally just 80 doors, and you just have to go profile hard R's and soft R's and people in the middle and just contact them. That's a bottom-up party. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, if I could tell you some tough love, because I think we're all friends here, you will lose Texas in a decade if more hands are not raised. So that's the easiest thing. I mean, just nationally, only 30% of precinct committee positions nationally are filled. It's one of the reasons why we lose.
Thank you, Charlie. Michael, what is happening with out-of-control spending, and how can we stop this?
So Rosie, your prayers, right?
Yeah. For me, it's easy. You vote no. The tricky part is getting enough other people to do that with me. But we've got to. Charlie's been so good tonight for this because obviously I go to Washington and I come back here, and the big question everybody has on their mind is, what do we do now? And it sometimes sounds like a cop-out coming from me because I do realize the weight of the responsibility, the job that you've elected me to do, to go in Washington and to take a stand and to do all those kind of things. But the solution that America needs right now is not coming from Washington. It's coming from, and again, I'm not washing my hands of the job that you've sent me to do. I take it very seriously and will continue to do that. But it's going to take all of us standing up and doing our part, and it's going to cost us something. I've said a number of times, first of all, when I was running, people would be like, why do you want to go to Washington? I'd say, I'm not wanting to go to Washington, I'm willing to go to Washington. There's a difference. But the understanding is right now, our system of government requires something out of us. And for me, a great motivation getting into this was my faith. And so those of you who are like me, our faith requires everything out of us. And so these things are going to come at a cost. It's going to, everybody wants to send someone else to do the job for them. Again, I need to do my job. You need to be able to hold me accountable, to ask those tough questions, all those kind of things. But it's also going to be people standing up in the school board meetings. It's going to have those tough conversations with people you've been associated with. But, I was saying this leading up to the election, and you just mentioned the quote, but it's been said that all it takes for evil triumph is for good people to do nothing. What I was saying leading up to the election is all it takes for good, all it takes right now I felt the need to revise that, I guess, for the time that we were in that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to be polite. And we are at a point right now where we can't keep sitting on our hands because we want to preserve the peace of the moment, but I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, peace isn't the absence of violence, it's the presence of justice. And so for that to happen, it's going to take all of us doing our part to stand for that. I know you asked me a spinning question. I'll keep voting no on these massively, horribly spending bills. But I'll tell you an example of it. And I know a member in my church who, when the PPP program came out, they applied for it. They didn't need it. I know they didn't need it, but they're like, well, if everybody else is doing it, I'm like, well, what about your faith? What about this? We've got to not just expect more out of Washington, but expect more about out of ourselves as well, and raise ourselves to the standard.
Sometimes I get a little frustrated with the Republicans in Congress, President Company accepted. Democrats say, oh, we want to spend $1.9 trillion on infrastructure. And then Charlie Wood Republicans say, oh no, we only want to spend $800 billion. You're right, I'm on a zero. I mean, we should be cutting spending in Washington, not raising it, right? We should be cutting spending. I'm not saying we shouldn't fix our roads and bridges and, fill our potholes. Of course we should. But here's a legislation I'd love to see you, champion. Let's take that $1.9 trillion, the blue state bailout money, and reprogram that to fix our roads, right? We don't need $800 billion more money. I hate this when Republicans say, we're what they're for, except a little less. That's not a winning strategy. We should be cutting taxes, cutting regulation, promoting American energy. And by the way, I've left out the single worst thing. I wonder how many agree. Of all the terrible things that Obama has done, I keep calling him Obama because maybe he's still running the White House. I think the single best thing that Trump did and the single worst thing that Biden has done is Trump had the guts to pull America out of the anti-America Paris Climate Accord. And Biden has put America back into the Paris Climate Accord, which is the worst deal ever. By the way, is there a single person in this entire room? Is there a single person who actually thinks China is going to reduce their carbon emissions? I mean, really, it's the biggest joke. I mean, China is by far the biggest polluter. Even if the United States didn't even exist, even if they obliterated, Charlie, all of the United States, it would make no difference with respect to climate change because China is building 100 coal plants as we speak. They're building the biggest pipeline in the world. Did you know this? From Siberia to China. Do you think they're building that pipeline because they want to use wind power? I mean, come on. They're going to use so much, and then Kerry. Is John Kerry like the stupidest person on earth? I mean, really. He goes to the this climate change delegation meeting, and he comes back. Oh yes, the Chinese say they're really committed to this, and as Donald Trump would say, they are laughing at us behind our back, and we cannot allow that to happen. By the way, John Kerry could just stop. If he just stopped flying all over the world in his Learjet, maybe he could contribute to the reduction in carbon emissions. God.
Thank you, Stephen. Actually, I had a question for you next, but you gave me the answer before I could ask, so I'm going to go to another question for you. That is, please describe in detail the impact of woke policies on the small business sector.
Well, look, I'm not going to dwell on this. I'd like your guys' response on this. This is a war on small business, too. I mean, think about this. First of all, small business in America, those are the heroes of the American economy. How many of you in this room own or operate a small business? Thank you. You're the heroes of our economy. And everything that Biden is doing is helping the big corporations. I mean, this is, Charlie and I don't always agree on all of this stuff, but I agree with you. Everything we're doing is benefiting. But by the way, why was it fair that Walmart got to stay open, but Joe's hardware store didn't? I mean, those kinds of rules were ridiculous. I mean, outrageous. And so so these small businesses, I don't know how you all did it. You got through this last year, amazing. A lot of you didn't have to, lay off your employees and so on. I mean, thank you for keeping this economy going. And yet now, just as the businesses, Texas is kind of different because you guys have been mostly open for a long time. But I got to tell you, Texas is not the rest of the country. All these blue states have been completely shut down. And these small businesses are finally getting their feet back on the ground. They're finally pulling themselves up and putting opening up the doors. And then think about what Biden wants to do with them. He wants to hit them with this massive tax increase. He wants to kill them with the minimum wage. All of these new regulations, it's just a killer for small businesses. And so I think the best thing we could do is, as you said, just stop all this assault against small business. Don't forget, when they talk about raising the highest income tax rate, that's the tax rate that's paid by small businesses. Small businesses don't pay a corporate tax rate. They pay the individual income tax rate, right? I mean, I see a lot of you nodding because you run small businesses. So again, can you think of one thing that the Democrats want to do that's actually going to help small? By the way, they want to unionize everybody too. Can I just say one last quick thing? I don't want to hog the microphone here, but there is a great story of sometimes we're too somber and we think we're losing. The truth is there are more of us than there are of them, right? There are more of us than there are of them. And this is a great story. Did you all follow what happened in Alabama about 2 weeks ago with the Amazon plant warehouse? This is an amazing story. The press didn't pay any attention to this, but there was a huge buildup in the media for about 3 or 4 weeks that this warehouse in Amazon that Amazon runs in Bessemer, Alabama, was going to be unionized, 6,000 people. And so the media was all in on this. Oh my God, it's great. By the way, the majority of the workers at this plant were minorities. They were minorities. And so the left thought that this is the greatest thing. Big labor is back, and everybody wants to join unions. And the media had all these stories about it, except they forgot to do one thing. They forgot to ask the workers what they wanted. And so they finally had the vote, even after the big labor spent tens of millions of dollars trying to get this, because they thought this was their foot under the door. And they had the vote about 10 days ago. Did you see what happened at the vote? You know what percentage of the vote the unions got? 29%. 29%. And people said, I loved it. They finally did ask the people after the vote, why did you vote against the union? They said, we don't want money taken out of our paycheck. I love those people. I mean, it was a great moment.
Thank you, Michael. Charlie, I think this one is good for you. Since limited government seems to be gone forever, what should be the number one message for the conservative moving forward for the future?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I hope limited government's not gone. But I think that, and Steve mentioned this a little bit, I think it'd be kind of fun to explore it. And Steve and I have known each other for years, and I'm more on kind of the Josh Hawley camp of this issue, which is, as conservatives, we should be very clear of why we believe in limited government. It's because we believe in limited power, and we don't want too small group of people having power to be able to abuse that power against its citizens. That's why we believe in limited government. And when the Founding Fathers wrote the Federalist Papers, the most dangerous form of power they could think of was an unchecked despot or tyrant or ruler using that power against the people. And so something that I've really become a vocal spokesperson on is that we have two governments in our country. And one of those governments is in Washington, D.C., and the other one's in Menlo Park. And Google, Twitter, Facebook, they're controlling just as much of the country as the Washington, D.C. government is. In fact, I would argue that in some ways Google is more powerful than our federal government. That Google is able to choose what voices are allowed to speak and not. Technically, the government can't do that. They still do that on the edges. But for example, if Google
if the government walked into this room right now and said, this is suspended, you are violating our community guidelines, we'd be able to sue our government and we would win. If Google shut off our stream right now, I have no way to sue Google at all. In fact, we could sue and you lose those lawsuits because of the Communications Decency Act that I think Steve would agree with. We gave them that carve-out back in the 90s, which was a government preferential treatment. However, I'm more in the category now that these companies are growing at such a rapid pace. Amazon's revenue increased by $100 billion last year. $100 billion. And these companies do not share our values at all. In fact, they hate you. And they are using their power to crush middle America. 40% of small businesses in certain states disappeared. Meanwhile, Amazon is building warehouses across the country. North Dakota governor doesn't sign a bill that says that men can't compete in women's sports because Amazon got the phone. They said, we're going to stop building our distribution center if you sign this bill. That's power that the Republican Party doesn't even have in North Dakota, which a party is supposed to represent its voters. So I'm very careful in saying this, but I've done a lot of praying and reflecting, which is that we as conservatives should be just as enthusiastic about reining in the IRS and the FBI and the EPA as we are reining in Facebook, Google, and Twitter. We should hate centralized power in all different forms and fashions, including in the private companies that are technologically terrorizing us and our children. I'll say two other things with this. I do not think we should fall in love with constant technological innovation. I think these phones have costs to them. I think they're making us less human. I think they're making our children less likely to dream, be self-reliant, be individual, more likely to be obedient, and less likely to actually find values of a connective tissue as a country. We're seeing more children on antidepressants, more children committing suicide. We're seeing less children go out and play, which was a thing that I used to do when they were 12 years old. Now they go and stare at their phone all day long. There's positives to these devices. We talked about them. Natural disaster response, keeping in touch with friends, being able to catalog, different things, phones, GPS technology. I will say the GPS thing, I think it was a good thing when you used to actually have to get maps and know where you are. You want to know why the country doesn't know where they are? Because they literally don't know where they are because their phone's going to tell them that. That's a side note. But I think we as conservatives need to be clear. We're conservatives, not libertarians. Libertarians have a position on this, but I think that we as conservatives should say, wait a second, is it good for humanity? Is it good for our country that Mark Zuckerberg is able to put $400 million into our election system, which is that he made thanks to Facebook? Meanwhile, Facebook can kick Donald Trump off its platform. They can manipulate the news cycle. Oh yeah, and one piece of negative information about Hunter Biden got introduced in October, and Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and YouTube said if you dare mention it, you lose your platform altogether. Steven Crowder, someone you all enjoy, has been demonetized on Google and YouTube. This is tyrannical forms of power that if our government was doing it, we'd be marching in the streets. And so I think it's long past time to throw the regulators at these companies, break them up into pieces, and we as conservatives should not be unapologetic about saying that.
Thank you, Charlie. Michael, what can we as an individual, or as a group to that matter, do to combat the fear tactics the left is using against us?
We talked about that a lot tonight, and really it's just, when I was running for office, many of you know, I started out as a county chair. I was working for a church, started out as a county chair. I went to vote one day. Somebody said, hey, you want to go to the precinct convention? I'm like, sure, yeah, what's that? Came back, our GOP was not as active as they could have been. We started a young Republican group. I ended up running for county chair. Anyway, all my experience was in the grassroots. So, a couple weeks ago when I'm at an event, somebody stands up and says, we need to be putting up billboards, we need to be walking in the streets, we need to do this. What he was really saying is I should be doing that. I said, those are great ideas, go do it. We have a job to do. We all have a job to do. We have a different job to do, but we have to stand up and have courage. And when I was running, there were a number of different things that we were asked to run, and my wife and I prayed over it and all these kind of things. But what it ended up being the verse really that guided our campaign was Joshua 1:9. And if you read Joshua 1, Joshua's talking, God's talking to Joshua, and he says, be strong and courageous. And then he gets a few scriptures later, and he says, be strong and courageous. By the time you get to verse 9 and 10, he says, haven't I commanded you to be strong and courageous? It's not a suggestion at this point, and we're not at a point in our nation where we can sit on the sidelines anymore It's a command. We have to be strong and courageous. We have to stand up when our business wants to introduce woke culture, or our students are faced with stuff in school. One of my sons, my kids are here. Hi, kids. And they love it when I tell stories about them, especially when they're here. But one came home from school one day, and this is long before I was serving in this office or any other office, and said, you know, he was praying for his lunch at school. Totally on his own. I wasn't there, and the teacher came up and said, this isn't the proper place to do that. Well, thankfully he came home and told me, and I called the superintendent and said, not as congressman, but just as citizen, and said, my son does have a right to pray in school. He can pray whenever, wherever he wants in this free country, and you're going to make sure to educate. You're going to have training with every teacher in this district to make sure they understand that as well. And thankfully he did that. But sometimes they need the permission from us to be able to do that. You know, 70% of teachers in Texas, the latest numbers I saw, say they're Christian. And where's the influence? We have to stand up. We have to be courageous. That's the key element that we're going to need from every single citizen.
This page is with Grassroots America, We the People, which is a statewide organization. Probably a lot of people are participating. We weren't available to ask a question, so I'd just like to ask one. We're in the middle of a fight that Charlie's been talking about. It's in Austin, Texas. We are a trifecta state where the Republicans control all the statewide offices.
For 19 years.
There were 7,000, and despite the lockdown, we had 7,000 delegates who came forward with 8 legislative priorities. We have about a month left, or less than a month left, in a 140-day legislative session. Now we wait 2 years before we have it again. Out of those 8 legislative priorities, we are fighting and fighting with thousands of calls, thousands of pressure, tons of testimony. And we are lucky to even maybe get something in election integrity. Maybe we can get constitutional carry and join the other 21 states. Maybe something on gender modification, probably nothing. I want you to speak to that and talk about the fight. The people here are in the fight, and the fight is within the part. I agree. You said it earlier. I'm telling you, this is a serious issue. It isn't about D.C. We change Texas and we change other places. I don't care about D.C. We have to change Texas, and we have to change this party from within.
So can I comment on that? I don't need to cut your time to speak, but so look,
I had a theory on this. It's really interesting, which is that if a state gets too Republican, it actually gets too liberal. And this is what's happened in Wyoming, North Dakota, and Texas. And this is why Florida, because the margins are so thin in Florida, they have to go back and earn their votes in their districts every single year. And, well, I know, but I'm not suggesting you guys become less Republican. That's not the... What I'm saying is that this is a problem, and I'm going to tell you why it's a problem. It's because Democrats don't go away, they just change their party affiliation, okay? And so in Florida, a Democrat runs as a Democrat. In Florida, a Republican runs as a Republican. So it's very clear what side you're on, right? In Texas, Democrats run as Republicans all the time. And so I don't know any names. I've just heard story after story after story after story after story. And so, and here's the thing, and I'm not here to go start a fight or anything, and I think he's done some things right and some things I would do differently. It all comes down to whether or not the governor is willing to lead and demand it. That's really what it comes down to. And so, and again, I'm going to say this, I think Abbott has been really good on certain issues, and I'm waiting to see how this legislative session ends on this, because there's still time left on the clock. And then I'll submit an opinion. What I can say, though, is that Ron DeSantis, from a state that is structurally less Republican than this state. What do I mean by structurally? There are more registered Democrats than Republicans in Florida. Let me say that again. There are more registered Democrats than Republicans in Florida. Yet Ron DeSantis is passing an anti-riot bill. He passed an anti-critical race theory bill. He improved already the best election system probably in the country that delivered early voting results for Trump. He also passed the tech company bill, and amongst other things. And so,
choice.
And school choice.
The most aggressive school choice measure in the United States.
And the fourth best school system in the country, where Texas, I think, is like 42nd. I could be wrong, but it's bad. It's bottom quartile. I do know that. And it's just right around there. And so, look, I think you're exactly right that the fight is within the Republican Party. I don't know a solution to that because I just came from North Dakota where we had 2,000 people. And they had the same complaint. And I guess the fight has to become in personnel selection and who you send in Austin. But man, these last 30 days is the most important. And so insofar you guys are in here, and I got to say, if we don't reform our elections, we're never going to have a free society again. We have to reform the way we do elections in this country. Texas, I would give a C on the way you guys do elections, not an F. I think it's better than most, but there's some improvements. But this critical race theory stuff, guys, I don't know if that's been signed or not, or if there's been any legislative movement. And then constitutional carry is a no-brainer. The gender modification thing is a no-brainer. And so insofar I can submit why this is happening, it's because you have moderate Democrats that run as Republicans because it's the only way they can get to power in the state.
Thank you. I believe next question will also address something that you mentioned, sir. But, and nobody, they didn't put their name on this question, so don't blame me, okay? But it says this. The Republican Party is aging. Please give us hope that there are young conservatives that would like to join the Republican Party. How do we engage them? How do we find them and how do we engage them? Who wants to take that?
You're the youngest man at the day.
I didn't want to just insert myself, but look, I do want to mention our Turning Point leaders. Stand up in the back. They do great. Give it up for these Turning Point leaders. I got to actually mention them. So, I have a list of their names, all of them. So, Marilyn, Carter, Madeline, Jake, Ricky, and Avery. Thank you guys for your leadership. It's terrific. And so, look, young people absolutely can become conservative. And I'm going to be honest, though, that the young conservatives are the ones that really understand the stakes of the fight right now. And I want to see people that are over the age of 50 fight as hard as our young conservatives are on these campuses. That's what I want to see. And a little call to action, get to know these young leaders in the back of the room. Have them over for dinner. Have a local Turning Point group and say, we're going to support you. We're going to pray for you. We're going to stay in touch with you. You guys can do that. You can talk to Turning Point groups all across the state. We have a group at Fredericksburg. We have a group in Kerrville. Our leaders back, Mark can help connect you with some of our Texas Turning Point leaders across the state. And the final thing I'll say that's really exciting younger audiences, the Republican Party has to be for something. It's not enough to say that we're against socialism and against Democrats. And so what are we for? We're for things that are timeless and we're for things that work. And the most fundamental thing that works is family creation and having children. This is something that late 20s and early 30-somethings are realizing more than anything else is a near impossibility because they've been scammed by college. I think most colleges are a scam in this country. Most, not all of them. Most degrees are a scam. Most, not all of them. And they did what they were supposed to do. And they go to Austin and they realize that I have to go rent an apartment for $3,200 a month and I have to go service my $85,000 a year student loan debt. And you're trying to tell me that I want to have kids, and it's the number one reason people give against having children is it's too expensive to have children in our country. And so whatever the Republican stands for, it should stand for more American-born children, fixing the population collapse that's happening in our country. And parents and grandparents out there, you guys might say, I don't get this. So in 1985, just to give an idea, in 1985, you were able to support a family of 4 with 36 weeks of labor, 36 weeks of labor. Now, to support a family of 4, it takes 53 weeks of labor. That means both the mother and the father have to get into the workforce, which I think is a bad thing. I think it should be optional for women to get into the workforce. In fact, I think if you force women into the workforce, it actually destroys the American nuclear family. And this is something that resonates with late 20-somethings, early 30-somethings. Let them go be the transgender party and the chaos party. If we're just as simple to young people that want to replicate their values and find someone they love and want to build a life, we should make it easier for that person to do that, whatever that looks like. And by the way, I think Steve and I agree with middle-class tax cuts and creating jobs and wealth. Whatever that is, That's a resonating message. And then standing firm and empowering clear, articulate voices against this woke garbage is so important. Saying that we care about character and we care about values, not skin color. That we are not going to value outrage, we are going to value virtue in this country. That we do not want to pursue pleasure, we want to pursue truth. There is a yearning out there for our leaders to all of a sudden talk to young people and say, we want you to take responsibility for our country. I'll say one last thing on this. We do this half right. We totally misunderstand Bernie Sanders. Young people do not vote for Bernie Sanders for free stuff. Some of them do. They vote for him for freedom. And I know that might make you laugh and chuckle, but if you had $195,000 in student loan debt, someone forgiving that debt, that's a ticket to freedom. And so if we even fail to address that these kids were fed a scam to go borrow money they shouldn't have, to study things that don't matter, to find jobs that don't exist, to be filled with awful ideas, to go get a small rental apartment in Austin, and they say, I've been screwed, and they're half right. Now, I don't like the victimhood economics. I don't like pandering to that stuff, but not mentioning it at all, I think, is a very, very big problem.
So, let me totally agree with you, Charlie, on this point. And, this is an issue that Republicans have so fumbled. The greatest financial scandal in America, bar none, is how much our universities and colleges are charging families. It's so outrageous. Why do we keep giving so much money to the universities? It's really, by the way, every time we give more and more aid to the universities, the more scholarships and more student loans, what do the universities do? They just raise their tuition. It's a dog chasing its tail. I mean, Republicans should be out front on this, and our response to Bernie Sanders should be, you're right. By the way, the average tenured professor makes $250,000, and they teach 4 hours a week. It's outrageous. What terrifies the universities, and you've had this issue here in Texas, and we kind of dropped it, is what terrifies the universities is that somebody dare look under the hood and see how that money is spent. Because these are the most wasteful, inefficient institutions. Moore's theorem is every university in America should cost half of what they charge. And they could easily do that and provide a superior education. I want to add one other point to what you're saying. There was this pretty famous study that was done about 4 or 5 years ago, and it alarmed me at the time, but I'm just now seeing the negative consequences of this, and something that Charlie was talking about. It was a poll of about 4,000 millennials. You're a millennial, are you not? I hate the millennials. I love.
It's all our fault.
No, I'm just teasing. But this was a poll of your generation, and it found 3 things that were extremely troubling about millennials. Number 1, they didn't want to have children. Number 2, they were not religious, and number 3, they were not patriotic. And by the way, so is it surprising that they would turn, socialism is a kind of new religion, right? Because it's actually very sad. If you don't have God to believe in and your country to believe in, what are you going to believe in? And so then the question is, why did they turn out this way? And we are responsible. We are responsible for the millennials, and I have 2 kids who are millennials, and I love them to death, but I don't always like them. But but here's the thing: we have a magical moment right now. What is the most evil institution in America today? The teachers' unions, obviously, right? The teachers' unions. The teachers' unions are a force. I'm not going to say this, and right now is a magical moment because the teachers' unions in America have never been less popular than they are today. Why? Because they shut down our schools. What we've done in the last year is the greatest episode of national child abuse in the history of this country. It is so... And by the way, Charlie and I are from Chicago. I still think the schools are still shut down. 14 months later, they've shut down the schools in Chicago, even though there's no... And my kids both go to private schools in Maryland because we can't send our kids to the public schools, and they've been doing that for 10 months. Do you know how many kids have gotten sick? 0. 1 teacher got the flu. And so my point is, this is a moment to really take on the teachers' unions and say, how did AOC turn out the way she is? She's not a stupid lady. Actually, AOC is a pretty intelligent person. She's just regurgitating everything that she's heard since kindergarten. We are letting the left indoctrinate our kids. And if we continue to allow that has to stop now. Right? That has to stop, not tomorrow, right now.
And I'm going to build on that.
Sermon.
Steve, you're exactly right. And so there's a crisis of purpose in our country, and I think that conservatives misunderstood the BLM Incorporated movement, of which I've been very outspoken against, obviously.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but the BLM movement is not a movement of black Americans.
No, it's not.
It is not it is white, rich kids. That's the
exactly
BLM movement.
Yeah, and I think we misunderstood it because what it was white upper middle class rich kids who don't have a purpose. And for the first time in their life, they got to believe in something and feel good while doing it. And and the young people will understand this better than not. If they were not allowed to take Instagram posts at these protests, no one would have showed up. Meaning they had to go show their friends that they were the ones that were going to go end racism in America, right? It was like, I need to not just do it, I need to do it publicly, and I need to tell people about it. So what does that tell us for conservatism? Well, look, if a very basic reading of human history is that human beings like to believe in something, and what better thing to believe in than the nation? And so I'm telling you, there could be an equal and opposite reaction here, where if we can give young people at least some optimism to believe in the American spirit, our tradition, our history, our customs, our culture, our language, you can see a revival towards American greatness very, very quickly, because there is this massive crisis of purpose. It's going to be just for us to fill that. And so we have to understand that's one of the things that's kind of underneath a lot of the political dynamics we're seeing.
Exaggerating here. You know, I live in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a pretty affluent area. You know, by the way, three of the five wealthiest counties in America are in and around Washington, D.C. That tells you a lot about who's getting rich off of government. But I would say it is I think Montgomery County, which is where Bethesda is the fourth wealthiest county in America. And they had, at the beginning of the BLM movement last summer, they had these they're spooky actually. They'd have these rallies, and they would have like 4 or 5 black people on the stage, and these kids would I'm not making this up, they would get down prostrate. And I'm like, oh my God, I mean, talk about, worshiping false idols, right? And this is exactly the point. If these kids don't have anything to believe in, they'll find something. They will find a false idol, and it's got to change. I mean, or our
That's
country is
right.
really
That's
impaired.
right.
Sorry.
How are we doing on time? Are you guys okay? Are you falling asleep, or you actually still want to hear more? There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Since we're talking about wealth, how about this? Somebody wants to know and wants to hear from you in simple terms that we can use as talking points, the impact of higher capital gains and wealth tax on small businesses, but especially on the elderly. Yes.
How many of you in this room own stock? I mean, everybody. If you don't own stock, especially young people, get investing early. So all the capital gains taxes is just a tax on owning stock and owning America, owning American companies. So it's just a tax on owning stock in America. And so when you raise that capital gains tax, you are putting these small businesses in real peril. And I'll just give you one real world example. So my son does work in Silicon Valley. He's one of these technology, brainiacs. And he called me about, 9 months ago, said, Dad, I'm going to start my own business. And I thought, this is, fantastic. I mean, that's the American dream, right? To start your own business. And, how many of you have started a business in this room? Most of you are. I've started 3 businesses. 2 of them failed. One of them was a modest success. And, 2 out of 3 small businesses fail. It's the ones that succeed are the ones that really propel the economy. And so anyway, I'm very proud of him. He wants to start this business, but to start it, he needs about $2 million in capital. And so what typically you do when you start a new business, for those young people here that haven't ever done that before, is the first round of capital usually comes from what's called friends and family. Friends and family puts up the first money. And so I believe in my son, and even if I didn't believe in this business, I would probably write him a check. But I wrote him a 6-figure check to help him get this thing off the ground. And hopefully it's going to be the next Apple, and I'm going to be able to survive, to get rich. But my point is, that is at-risk capital. I'm putting my money on the line here. And now, let's say that company does succeed. Now the government's going to take, they're going to take the tax right off the business. Then they're going to tax me at the capital gains rate. Then, by the way, if I die with that stock, they're going to tax me again. They're going to tax me 3 times. 3 times. So my return on that money, if it succeeds, is I'm going to get I calculate, I'm going to get less than 40 cents on the dollar. So do you see what I'm saying? The incentive to invest in that small business is very much reduced. And that's, I think, the biggest problem with raising the capital gains tax. I think it's going to stop the investment in startup businesses, which is what America needs to succeed. Jack Kemp, do you all remember Jack Kemp, the great, great Jack Kemp? He used to say, the capital gains tax is a tax on the American dream. So you remember that one. It's a good line, right? The capital gains tax is a tax on the American dream.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. One last question, and I think that Charlie would probably jump on this one, but all of you should comment as what are your thoughts on media censorship such as Trump being removed from Twitter, Facebook, and how should we respond to that? What should we do about it?
Steve, do you want to jump in first on that? It's just the social media tech issue. Okay, yeah, I mean, look, I've benefited from these tech companies. 7 million combined followers. A lot of our students follow us on social media. And I mean, I've become very much of a technology skeptic in the last year, largely because we became so technology focused through the Zoom and Skype proliferation. And I think there's nothing like human contact and being around other human beings and gathering in rooms together. We are more than just a computer screen. It's like a fire on a TV. It's like you could see it, but there's no warmth, right? And so let me just make a different point that I didn't make earlier, which is that these companies are developing technologies that are unlike anything that we as human beings have really ever wrapped our head around. And I'm afraid, and I'm not the only one that shares this fear, Elon Musk shares this fear, Peter Thiel shares this fear, that if we do not control this technology will soon control us. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. And that singularity is coming in 15 years. Singularity is when a computer is self-aware. Now, I'm not saying Terminator is around the corner, okay? I'm not saying that Sensodyne Systems is going to be here anytime soon. What I am saying, though, is that when Apple and Google employ thousands of neuroscientists, they bring in 4, 5, and 6-year-olds into Apple and Google, and they treat them like lab rats and tests of how to make those devices more chemically addictive to your children. There's something really sinister about that. And I can't quite articulate it, but it's not good for humanity. When the profit model is I get your 6-year-old to go spend 8 hours a day in front of a screen. That's not a good thing. And here's the other thing that is just something interesting to think about. The people who have founded these companies that are willing to speak out, none of them allow their children to use the applications that they developed. The head of Pinterest, the head of Gmail, you guys might have saw that piece, Social Dilemma for Netflix. And so Steve and I really agree on economic entrepreneurship innovation. But in the tech thing in particular, I don't think it's an innovation like others. This is not hardware development. Instead, we're making computer processing quicker. Basically, we're just making the computer smarter and more efficient. Now, what's the danger in that is that soon I'm afraid that if we do not seize this like nuclear weaponry and use it for the collective good, and yes, I am going to use that phrase collective good, we are going to be controlled by these things and an ever-growing minority of angry, soulless, secular despots in Menlo Park that know that they can addict us and control us and manipulate us at a few pushes of a button. How many of you get Apple News? All of you do. They are controlling the headlines you see, whether you realize it or not. It's the #1 news aggregator in the country. And so I'm not even sure what the solution is. I'm more of just diagnosing the problem. What I am saying, I'm going to use a Chuck Schumer term, it's all on the table. All of it. Because this is not something that we've used before. This is not a faster car or a more efficient airplane. This is a sea change in a type of technology that people that have always wanted to control their human beings are licking their chops over, and the CCP is doing this right now through massive social control. And so there needs to be bold and dramatic action here. And the final thing I'll say is this, which is that conservatives should stand for what is good for human beings. And when I see 7-year-olds with their parents at a restaurant and no one is talking to each other and they're all staring at their devices, I'm going to say very clearly, that's not a good thing for humanity, and it's got to stop.
Thank you. Michael, would you like to elaborate on that a little more?
Sure.
Thank you.
And there's so many places to go with this. I was in committee hearing recently, and the point that I was making was the fact that, 15 years ago, we looked at this as a great American success story, and there's a lot of built-in trust because, the leaders of these companies were these young upstarts. They were going to do corporate America right. They were going to do the. But what we've seen, and it goes back to what we talked about in government, but really essentially it's this theological question. Power corrupts, and the whole point of our republic was to disperse power so that these pockets of corruption would be small and manageable. And so this move, whether it's in policing or whether it's in larger government or anything, has to do with taking those small pockets of corruption that are manageable. And this is why you need to be involved in local elections and school boards and everything like that. That's where the real fight is supposed to be in our form of government, and moving it to an uncontrollable mass that's controlled by an elite few. And so this is what's happened when it comes to big tech. So it is a monster to deal with right now. From a legislative standpoint, I'll say a lot of the work has been done, because what's happening is they're tracking you everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. You pass a gas station, they know you were there, all this stuff. You're being tracked everywhere you go. Online learning, yes, we got through COVID with online learning. Profiles are being made of your kids right now that will be used to track them everywhere. So they're after our kids, they're after our kids' minds. We talked just a moment ago about reaching young people. The one thought I wanted to add is the place we find young people is we raise them. And we have to be active, we have to be involved. It's not an accident that we adjusted our schedule to make sure my 10-year-old and 11-year-old and 14-year-old were here tonight to hear what's going on. Because whether it's universities or whether it's big tech, they are in a war for our kids' minds. And we're not in the society we were 50 years ago where we share this common ethic and kind of society, and the neighborhood's going to take care of our kids, and if I just live right, my kids will model it. They'll get to that point until they go to college or until they're looking at their Google aggregated news feed before an election that's specifically tailored to change their mind, and they have scientifically done this to sway voters intentionally up to an election. So all of this needs to be done. But back to the policy standpoint, a lot of this has been a lot of the legislative discussion has centered around the privacy issue and attacking this from a privacy issue. I think that's helpful. I'm all for let's look at antitrust. Let's look at everything we need to do. But I think one of the things that we've been looking at in our legislative staff is addressing this more from a private property standpoint, in the sense of who owns the data. If we just answer that question and recognize that you're the ones creating the data, you own it, you should be able to manage it, I think that'll take the rug out from underneath a lot of these issues that are going on. So, yeah, and it'll destroy the profit model.
Coming to an end, by the way, you guys are greatly represented by this great conference. I just want to end on a kind of positive note, because I've been to this movie before. I've been in this business for 35 years. I came to Washington in around 1984. And so I lived through the Republican Revolution. Remember the Republican Revolution in 1994 with Newt Gingrich. And at that time, I was working for Dick Armey from Texas. Do you all remember Dick Armey? One of the guys I learned more about politics than anybody, and was so smart. And anyway, I remember when Dick Armey came to my office when I was working for him, and he said, Steve, we're going to take the House in the fall. And I just laughed at him, because it seemed, remember, because the Democrats had controlled the House for 50 years. It seemed like the most improbable thing. And of course, they had this vision. We won the House, we won the Senate, we won every race around the country. Remember that? And that was one of my favorite moments in history. And that's because Bill Clinton became president, and he raced out to the left, remember, with Hillary Care and all these crazy tax increases and all of these things that the American people rejected. And then we saw a replay of that, remember, in 2009, when Barack Obama was elected president. By the way,
Barack Obama's approval rating at this point, after 100 days, the Democrats are crowing, oh my gosh, Biden's approval rating is like 53%. You know what Obama's approval rating was? Like 68%. I mean, Americans really wanted this president, first black president. I'm very proud that we had our first black president. We really wanted as a country for this president to succeed, but he made the same mistake Bill Clinton made. What did he do? He rushed way out to the left with one crazy, massive spending bill after another, and we wiped out the Democrats in 2010. Remember? And we just wiped them out in one of the biggest landslides ever. We are going to wipe these people out in 2022. We are going to wipe them out. We're going to have historical wins, but we have to work for it. And I just have to say, I love looking out at this audience and seeing so many women dressed in red, because we're going to turn this country red in the fall. And I know it's coming, but we do have to work at it, because these guys have so much more money. I mean, what did they outspend us in?
10 to 1, easily.
The amount of money they have, that's why we need troops on the ground. That's why I am so appreciative of you all being here and taking a Saturday night to care about your country. Now get 20 other people to do the same thing, okay? And we're going to win. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Sign up to be a precinct committee person. Help the Turning Point chapter leaders think creatively and optimistically and aggressively on how we can take back terrain. They are afraid of you guys rising up. Let's do it.
Hey, remain seated, please. I have a book. Mike, I have 2 books back there behind you on the table. May I have them? Stephen Moore and...